Last month, we referred to Cull Obsidian as the meat stack of February. Let me introduce you to March's meat stack, Mockingbird. Try saying that 3 times fast. Welcome in, folks. For those who do not know, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming, and we need to talk about Mockingbird, the new Series 5 card coming to Marvel Snap. She's an incredibly exciting card because her condition to work is very, very attainable in the current landscape and will only continue to get better and better over time as more cards that feed into this specific mechanic are added. So let's break down Mockingbird, and if you like these types of deck, card, etc. breakdowns, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. So let's swing on over there. Let's join up and see what is Mockingbird going to bring to the party. She's bringing in a 5/9 stat line, which is on par with, your Abomination, but look at that effect there. Costs 1 less for each card you have in play that didn't start in your deck. Think about that for a second because there's a lot that do count and a lot that don't count. So that reduction, we've seen these kinds of reduced cards, whether it be She-Hulk, we've seen Abomination, there's those conditions to make it happen. But the conditions in which Mockingbird can be reduced, honestly, are probably some of the easiest conditions I've seen yet, and in my opinion, might make her more viable in certain decks than that big, beefy Cull Obsidian that we talked about and saw earlier. So let's take a look at what Mockingbird's gonna do. Tokens. Token cards count. What do I mean by tokens? Those are your cards that come from other cards on the battlefield. So your squirrels that come out of Squirrel Girl, your Doombots that come out of Dr. Doom, Broodlings, the Sinister Clone, etc. You get what I'm saying, right? Those cards that multiply and create another card that has no effect on it, those are tokens. And each of those counts. So yes, you could play down Squirrel Girl on turn 1, and that automatically in your hand makes your Mockingbird a 3/9. Like that. Which is mind-blowing to me already that it could be as simple as that. You know what else counts? Because it didn't start in your deck and is also a 1 cost, the Infinity Stones. It's even in the video. Take a look at this. The gameplay video is showing the stone goes down and she reduces in hand. So yes, you are potentially looking at another card for Thanos, which might replace Cull Obsidian because Mockingbird can't be Shang-Chi. That's a huge plus. So we'll come back to the Thanos synergy in just a moment though, but let's look at what else counts. Added cards, things like the hammers that come from Beta Ray Bill and Thor. Those count. The demon that comes from it back into your hand, yes, from the hood, but as it's played on down, it's technically an added card, but you could call it a token as well. You get what I'm saying though. If it's added to the deck or to the hand via a card mechanic as another card, that also counts. Widow's Bites, same idea, okay? Copied cards. Those are not cards that started in your deck. So therefore, it also counts. So think of Arnim Zola. If you read Arnim Zola, it destroys a card and creates copies. The copies didn't start in the deck. Same thing with Multiple Man. And some of you may already be getting ahead of me on one of the decks. I'm way ahead of you on it. We'll get to that one too. Transformed cards are also cards that do not start in your deck because they've transformed into something from your opponent, whether that be via Loki or even whether that be via Morph. Those don't start in your deck. Therefore, it's gonna reduce the Mockingbird, which is insane that there are so many different mechanics out in this game that are gonna turn this into a 9 power card for next to nothing and organically ends up fitting in a wide variety of decks. Now, what does not count? First and foremost, evolved cards. It's still a card that goes into your deck, right? Misty Knight in a high evolutionary deck is not changing to a new Misty Knight. It's still Misty Knight. The text just changed, which means that any text change card also does not qualify. So your Iron Lad copying the card effect from another card doesn't turn Iron Lad or Mystique, same thing, doesn't turn either of those cards into cards that qualify for Mockingbird. So now you know what does count and what doesn't count. And now think about how easy it's gonna be to make Mockingbird a sometimes potentially free card to play on the battlefield. So let's get into the decks. I've built something I never thought I should build, but it makes a lot of sense. Take a look, I'm calling this Patriot and Junk. And yes, you are running the Junk package, because if you put down the demon, that counts. And the void also counts. So for the turn that the void is on your side of the battlefield, it actually will reduce down Mockingbird. But the second that you send it over, it no longer reduces the Mockingbird. So it could end up that between a Mr. Sinister, Patriot, Brood combination, that we end up with this junky, cloggy effect that also then benefits Debris 2 times over, because now we're playing into Junk Clog while also playing into Patriot simultaneously. And we've seen some variations many moons ago that used to play Debris with Patriot, so I wanted to try to capitalize on it. I had Forge in here, for example, but it never felt good because I always wanted to have something that gave me a little bit more oomph. And that's where Hope Summers comes to be, because Hope Summers in Patriot with this gives the ramp potential to also get that Dr. Doom out on turn 4 or, turn 5 in particular, with a little bit of ramp on turn 4, play a couple cards onto the Hope Summers lane. Now we're cooking, get the Doom bots out, get a nice advantage where you could potentially play both Mockingbird and Alioth on turn 6. So depending on what you draw, you've got several different packages built into this, because you don't need the Broodlings to be too crazy high in power. You don't need to reinforce them with cards like Forge and, well, let's be honest, it was only Forge that was ever really doing it, but it's a great mixture of take advantage of the tokens that do come from the Junk package and integrate it into another grouping. You could look at substituting out that Alioth, for example, for something like a Hazmat if you want to try to also send over those rocks, but I feel like you're working too hard at that point, and you'd want to go more all in with what this deck wants to do, which is benefit the rocks on your side because of Patriot, so it makes it a little bit more blurred in the lines. I love this deck concept. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy this one. Now, going back to what I alluded to earlier with Multiple Man and Arnim Zola, a Phoenix Force deck makes a lot of sense to take advantage of Mockingbird, because think about it. It's not going to count the Phoenix Force reviving the card. Let's make that very clear. That does not count. However, the copies of Nimrod that could come from Arnim Zola, those count. The copies of Multiple Man that end up on the board, those count. So we had to look at how to cut it on out, and I wanted to still be able to integrate another package in here, so I went with the Magic Arnim Zola Null package, because you do have a bunch of cards you can destroy, but if you can't revive anything, okay, you're looking at the Nimrod line, most likely, right? Well, what if you can't do anything there? Okay, so let's look at just destroy a whole bunch of everything and then go into Null Zola on turn 7. So I wanted to find a package that worked with Mockingbird to specifically capitalize first and foremost on the Multiple Man copies and the Nimrod copies being multiplied in the earlier turns on turns 4, 5, and potentially 6. So that way Mockingbird is a bonus power play on turn 7 that your opponents will not see coming with this deck. The cost on putting magic into it to put the null line did mean I removed Deathlock and did mean I removed Ghost Spider from this standard style of build. However, if you want to go down that line and you don't like the null package, you could easily integrate those two cards in exchange for magic and null. Cards that don't start in your deck, like an Ebony Blade or copies of Swarm. Yes, a discard package could potentially work. So this is a little bit of a riskier version, the Mo.D.O.K.ingbird. I'm playing the Black Knight package in here because if it all pans out well, you do have the option of being able to remove that Infinite into an Ebony Blade and pop it on down, or get a whole bunch of Swarms into your hand and then play a whole bunch of those down on turn 4 or turn 5, depending on how you need to play your Mockingbird, who's a great backup plan for this style of discard deck, because she's also a great card that you don't have to play. You can leave her in her hand, and that turns Dracula, when all is said and done, into a 4/10. So a big card that gets cheap to play down in the curves is something that I liked about looking at a discard package, but it also shows a little bit of risk reward because of the packages you've built with your Black Knight, Lady Sif, Ghost Rider, for example, right? You want the Infinite package to do its thing, but Black Knight needs to take advantage and put an Ebony Blade out there too. So how can we get that blade out there? What cost is it going to happen at? Well, it could happen as cheap as turn 3, and it could be an Ebony Blade that just it got rid of Mockingbird. Okay, that's not the worst thing in the world. It's still a 4/9 that's dropping down. So we have good potential here in a Mo.D.O.K. style package, because Mo.D.O.K. not coming down on 5 never feels good. So how do you play around that? You bleed into the Ebony Blade line, or you play your Ghost Rider, bring back the Infinite line, or just keep discarding things until you get rid of that giant apocalypse on the final turn. I'm seriously not serious about this deck. Look at what it will do on autopilot. It is an Agatha Thanos deck. This might be a variation of what you run into in Infinite, and I'm putting it up here in particular to show you. Why? Because there is a chance you will face this. Does this mean that you're playing it? No, but this does mean that you could potentially run into certain parts of this deck. Look at all of the cards that will reduce down that Mockingbird, making it really easy for Agatha to play down. Agatha playing down the stones, Morph transforming into a card, Shanna putting 3 cards that didn't start in your deck onto the battlefield, Thor's Hammer, Beta Ray Bill's Hammer. That's a ridiculous amount of cards to get down a free Mockingbird. So there's a good amount of power that can come from that. So I want you to see this. I want you to understand that there's a chance that a variation of this will hit you at some point, especially if you're in Infinite play, where apparently there's this giant Agatha league that people love to play Agatha in Infinite for the funsies of it. Mockingbird fits organically into that style of deck. So something like this could make a lot of sense. You could see Blue Marvel get dropped in here, but I think Mockingbird actually gives more benefit because it's going to be so cheap. Because the second those 0-cost hammers come on down, Agatha plays them down. The second that Morph comes on down on turn 3 and transforms into a card, Mockingbird's now a 4/9. That's pretty damn strong. So it continues to get stronger and stronger if Agatha also doesn't choose her. So by turn 5, or even turn 6 when she plays herself, it could still actually get played down. That's a lot of power to keep an eye on autopilot for. So why am I flying south? Because this is something you may seriously run into. But now for an actual real Thanos deck. I do think Thanos Zoo is making a much stronger push right now in the Marvel Snap meta because of the absence of Lockjaw. So let's spin into the ongoing Thanos Zoo aspect a little bit and play Mockingbird in it, because you organically will run Squirrel Girl in a lot of those builds, which will, of course, cheapen down that Mockingbird as a great turn 3 option if you play down Squirrel Girl on 1. But if you also play down some stones, by turn 3, Mockingbird could actually be a 1-cost card, which is a scary, scary thing to play down a 1/9 that can't be Shang-Chi'd that early in the game. Talk about a prio steal. So let's play into it and feed off of it. We want to put other ongoings in here, so I am putting in Cosmo, because again, I do think Cosmo is becoming more and more important in these decks and within this meta, so I am going to put in Cosmo as an ongoing piece there. Kazar, Blue Marvel, you get the understanding of a lot of those ongoing packages. Spectrum, of course, is your turn 6 option to reinforce everybody under the sun, including Ant-Man, who is just thriving right now with his extra buff. So Mockingbird has stones to get reduced down and the squirrels to get reduced down. But what's nice is that even if you don't have Mockingbird until the final turn, chances are you've played down all of the other tokens, you've played down a couple of stones. She's a great partner option to give a surprise play, for example, with Dazzler as a final 1-2 punch towards the end, or have her be a 1-cost card that goes down with Blue Marvel at the very end for your turn 6. There's a lot of potential with Mockingbird because she doesn't have to be played early. It's an extra perk if she does, but in a deck that's already doing pretty well, integrating her versus the Shang-Chi-able Cull Obsidian, I like Mockingbird's full game value more than, okay, turn 4, 5, or 6, I could drop a 10 power beefy card. But if you don't have Thanos, you still can run Zoo. You can still lean more heavily into that Zoo aspect with Mockingbird by exclusively playing into the Squirrel Girl and Shanna line, because Shanna's putting 3 cards down. That's going to reduce her down to a 2/9. Squirrel Girl, of course, that's going to reduce down 2. Just Shanna and Squirrel Girl filling up your board. Yeah, you can play your ongoings, but sometimes you just really need that extra piece of beefy power, especially if you're gonna need some defense in there also. Shadow King is gonna need to be in there, and I'm putting Storm in here with the Dazzler deck on purpose. A lot of people like to play Scarlet Witch because it's a cheap option, and especially in a Zoo deck, you wanna have those flexibilities for towards the final turn, that are giving you that possible extra 1 cost to drop on down, so you don't run a lot of 6s. Maybe you want to play the Ultron line, maybe you want to play the Onslaught line. I don't think that's going to be necessary because Storm is actually a great win condition here because of Shanna and Squirrel Girl being able to reach into there afterwards. It could be a later turn 6 play both of them down with Dazzler. That's a hell of a lot of cards dropping down really, really fast. And Mockingbird just ends up organically fitting into the early game aspect of her play. But as a later turn, holding on to her for the final turn as a surprise, that could be a direction to go with her too. But it does fit into Zoo naturally. And don't forget, Nico still can also give you a demon. Moon Girl will reduce down Mockingbird. So put her into a shell that already works, which is Moon Girl She-Hulk. But how can we take further advantage of that? One of the things of the high Evo decks that I do like is that it gives you that flexibility of saying earlier on, how do I need to play my final turns? You know pretty much by turn 2 what your game plan already has to be by turn 6. And I like the idea of doubling up on the Magic and Hope Summers on this style of deck because you need Moon Girl, because you need to double up cards, because you need to save a bunch of time, skip some turns. Let's go ahead and take advantage of that by having that turn 7 in there, dropping down those A-bombs, dropping down those She-Hulks, and I am going to keep A-bomb just by having Cyclops and Wasp in here because it's very fast for Cyclops on by turn 7 to have hit at least 2 cards. And especially if you Moon Girl the Wasp, target 2 separate lanes, reduce 2 other cards, 1, 2. That double up Abomination play with Moon Girl could be very valuable. So I'm looking at Mockingbird in this style of deck thinking, what is she going to provide with the Moon Girl package? It's exclusively a play that synergizes into She-Hulk specifically. So I am playing Mockingbird on here as a, look, you got your She-Hulk line? Great, Mockingbird is a perk. Mockingbird is a card that you use when you need to not play Hulk. Hulk is a very dangerous card in the Evo decks because it can be Shang-Chi'd. And in a deck that's not going to be running Armor or Kyera, you need to know you have other options in this world of Shang-Chi that we live in. Mockingbird is going to be able to provide that because it can be reduced down via the other cards you've played down. So whether you hold that Misty Knight to be doubled up and drop 2 Misty Knights later on, because one of them is going to be reducing that Mockingbird, and then you hold on to that Cyclops because another one's going to be reducing Mockingbird, you can do that. Wasp, yes, you can replace Wasp in this deck if you don't want to go down that path line, but I like Wasp with Abomination. If you want to go down the, hey, I didn't get the Hope Summers pass, go ahead and put Quinjet in here because that's an organic synergy as well for Moon Girl. But I like Hope Summers to give that extra power space to allow Cyclops more often the time to proc, or extra power to ramp up that Sunspot. Mockingbird being doubled up in the ladies of Evo is a way to give some extra surprise, especially in Conquest. Lastly is a Loki build, because Loki benefits you in 2 different ways with Mockingbird. Number 1, if you draw Mockingbird late, that's not the end of the world, because you Loki early into eventually drawing Mockingbird. Well, guess what? You probably played down cards that you just Loki'd. So all of those transformed cards from Loki will reduce Mockingbird. but you can also play into it earlier via your Maria Hill, your Snow Guard, and your Agent Coulson, which are giving you cards that didn't start in your deck. So if you don't go down the Loki line, you're sitting on the Devil Dinosaur play, you're sitting on a boatload of power that can be dropped down from Mockingbird, and I like Maria Hill better than Agent 13 here because it's a guaranteed 2-drop if you don't have Zabu. So depending on how you draw your hand, it depends on if you need to use that extra card, or do you guarantee yourself Zabu on 2, which is almost always the target for this deck anyway. So organically, it kind of naturally fit in there, especially with Ms. Marvel, because it always felt good to play Devil Dinosaur, but sometimes you'd really want to go beefy in one lane, and Mockingbird now allows you to play another 5 on another lane, and 9 power is nothing to sneeze at. So I think that it gives you a little more flexibility for when you don't play Loki, when you have this deck, because Agent Coulson's already a powerhouse. And yeah, you could look at Nick Fury, but I'm not a huge fan of the Nick Fury play down one of those cards on 5 as a backup plan. You're kind of leaning more into just Devil Dino at that point. And I wanted to have some flexibility if you draw Mockingbird late. How is it going to be benefiting you? Because it's sitting in the deck for much longer. A deck like this gives you the flexibility of putting down Mockingbird earlier if you play down Bears and Hawks and Agent Coulson's pop-ups or Maria Hill's pop-ups, but it also allows you the chance of, if you draw it after you've Loki'd, to still also get it for much cheaper. Mockingbird's an exciting card. She's got a lot of potential, and I do think that because specifically she is a card that can easily be ramped down, that stays under Shang-Chi range, that she is worth your investment getting this season. There are a lot of really great cards this season, but so far between Hope Summers, Pixie, and Mockingbird, the cards that are being released in the first part of the season, Mockingbird is definitely outshining over Pixie, and in my opinion, in the long run, will be a consistent power player option for your decks, especially if you did not pick up Cull Obsidian in the past. Mockingbird is a great alternative for you. I love her. I think she's going to be a great card for Marvel Snap. I recommend her 100%. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a comment down below of which deck you're going to give a try out for, and I'll see y'all next time.